Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kevin Newman, and I'm so glad that you are joining the inaugural Chesapeake Bay Program Diversity Workgroup Presents event. I'm the chair of the Diversity Workgroup, and I'm also an environmental protection specialist at the District Department of Energy and Environment. I want to thank the Diversity Workgroup Steering Committee for their service and help in identifying our panelists today. Today, we are presenting a discussion on green reentry. You might be wondering what we mean by reentry. For today's discussion, reentry refers to returning to the community from prison or jail. We know there are several terms used by different jurisdictions and organizations for programs such as this, but for today's purposes, we will use the term reentry. Here's an interesting fact for you to ponder. The United States releases over 7 million people from jail and more than 600 people from prison each year. I'm going to pause for a moment just so you can understand that. Nearly half of formerly incarcerated people are unemployed, a staggering 47%. And another staggering 25% leave prison without a high school diploma, GED, or college degree. The strongest predictor for recidivism or returning to prison is poverty. Poverty is not only a predictor of incarceration, it is also frequently the outcome, as a criminal record and time spent in prison destroys wealth, creates debt, decimates job opportunities, and sometimes ruins families. It's no surprise that people of color who face it's no surprise that people of color who face much greater rates of poverty are dramatically overrepresented in the nation's prisons and jails. These racial disparities are particularly stark for Black Americans, who make up 40% of the incarcerated population, despite representing only 13% of US residents. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, perfect outcomes are often difficult to impossible for people leaving incarceration, as evidenced by the overwhelming prevalence of homelessness, unemployment, and poverty among formerly incarcerated people. One compounding challenge for returning citizens is that some employers ask if you have a criminal record, which can create additional barriers to unemployment. The organizations you will hear from today are working to address these outcomes by providing green job training and green jobs to formerly incarcerated people. Let me introduce our panelists. First, we will hear from Mr. Wellington Ash. He is the Associate Director of Training at Civic Works. Then we will hear from Mr. Alex Smith, owner of Division Street Landscaping, Churchland Professional Services, and 5A15B Consulting, and founder, Division Street Landscaping. Alex, I sure hope I didn't slaughter that. In the end, our final panelist will be Ms. Bakira W. Shabazz. She is the founder and president of First Alliance Consulting, LLC, and the Criminal and Justice Reform Network. She's also a community engagement liaison with the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative. Also, Ms. Shabazz is a member of the Diversity Workgroup Steering Committee. Wellington, on to you.
All righty, thanks so much. And good afternoon, everybody. As has been said, I'm Wellington Bruce Ash. I am the Associate Director for Training at the Civic Works Center for Sustainable Careers, and where we are expanding access to family-sustaining careers and advancing equity and job quality. I'm going to talk just a little bit about how we do that. Next slide. The Center for Sustainable Careers, as you see, is a venture and a nonprofit of the nonprofit Civic Works. We are about expanding access to family-sustaining careers for Baltimore residents facing systemic inequity. We support Baltimore residents in building the skills needed to secure quality employment. We also work with employers around investing in making sure that their workplaces and practices are equitable for everyone. In terms of the green jobs, we train folks in residential energy efficiency, what we call weatherization, since 2010, solar installation since 2016, and environmental remediation since 2003. Next slide. As was mentioned just a moment ago, some of the statistics, 33% of Americans have criminal records, which is an increase from 1965 of 11%. 49% of Black men are arrested by age 23. This crazy, staggering. And 87% of employers conduct background checks. That's an increase from 1994, significant increase. 60 to 70% of formerly incarcerated individuals are unemployed, which is basically tantamount to telling people you want them back in jail, because if you don't provide people for an opportunity to take care of themselves, they will very possibly revert to illegal means to support themselves and their families. 70% of residents without GEDs report difficulty in finding family supporting jobs, because of course in our society, diplomas and GEDs and degrees are standards which most jobs deal with. 77% of those without GEDs are Black. Next slide. We'll go to the next slide. We use an integrated approach, classroom and hands-on training. And of course, during the pandemic, we have used a hybrid model of virtual learning to do some of our classroom training to reduce exposure so that we can continue training through the pandemic. Because the jobs that we train people for have survived the pandemic. A lot of the work is outdoors and in wide spaces, so folks are able to continue. On-the-job training, we find that on-the-job training provides an audition and an ability for further skills acquisition, and for folks who may not have done the type of work they've trained with us in to acclimate to the workplace more. Employer job quality and equity, we work with the employers who are our partners so that when our graduates finish training, they actually have a place to go to work. They don't just fill out applications and hunt for jobs. They have a placement awaiting them. Next slide. This is addressing systemic employment barriers. Wow, people of color are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system, as you've heard. We are 13 to 15% of the population, depending on what census, and we are 40 to 47% of the prison population. Can you imagine? Just let that sink in for just a second. 15% of the population, and yet almost half of the prison population. That speaks for itself. And there are people in many communities that will say, well, you shouldn't commit crimes. Well, the laws, first of all, are not equally enforced, and the justice system is not equally weighted. So, I mean, just as a metaphoric example, just look at the crack versus cocaine laws. Cocaine is pure, crack was a derivative and is cut, yet the penalties for crack cocaine, which was a scourge in our community, tended to be way, way higher, not to mention 3 strikes, you're out, which would send people back to jail automatically and for life for a third offense. So the prison industrial complex basically wants to put folks in cells because it makes money for some folks. And that's a problem. And it disproportionately affects those who are most voiceless and those who are most poor and those who have least opportunity. Skills gap, underinvestment in residents of color, and inadequate opportunity to obtain employer-recognized marketable job skills and certifications. Problem 2, hiring, closed recruitment networks, holding people's records against them, even if they are very, very old and have nothing to do with the job that the person is applying for. When will we learn that when we put a person in jail, that's supposed to be them paying their debt to society? Why do we continue to make them pay for their debt once they are done with their prison sentence? Why would we do that? We just create a frustrated, unemployable individual who is more likely to be, to fall into the recidivist category and continue to fuel the prison industrial complex. In many cities, including Baltimore, where we operate, transportation, most high quality employment opportunities are not public transit accessible. Again, denying opportunities to those who may need it most and may be most in need of transportation assistance. The persistent racial wealth and income gap denies people of color the stability to retain employment. The examples are numerous. We here at Civic Works deal with a whole person approach and wraparound services. You can't just give a person job skills and expect that, okay, they're ready to go. Communication, the ability to navigate the work environment, sometimes for the first time, and wraparound services including helping folks with driver's licenses, helping them with financial literacy and education. So planning to utilize their money to the best of their ability and educating them as to what they should expect in terms of the workplace itself and the ability to move up. Workplace bias that impede employment and retention and advancement are some of the issues that we take on. Next slide, please. The benefits of construction green sector. No formal education is actually required. Here at the Center for Sustainable Careers, we do not require a high school diploma nor a GED for participation. And yet, when folks are done, they are able to attain living wage jobs. So, you can give folks a lot of knowledge in a short time and the certifications that make them more marketable and special enough to compete, and they are highly motivated. Graduates qualify for mid-skill positions, earning family-sustaining wages. The growing industries that we train for also allow for folks to have a career as opposed to just a job. We can provide those participants with the certifications that we provide a competitive advantage during the training period. Next slide. So our progression is, recruiting and screening. Our population for our clientele self-select to a certain degree because they have heard about us. We are not a re-entry or returning citizen or whatever particular phrase in vogue that you may use. We're not a re-entry program per se. We just have been so successful in placing folks who are re-entering that the community of folks who are coming home have found us. And so we will have between 80 to 95% of our clientele will be returning citizens. Job readiness training follows the screening process, industry certifications and hands-on instruction, followed by graduation, which in some cases is the first graduation that folks have had, followed by job placement. And then we follow all our placements for a minimum of 2 years. But there are folks that I talk to on a daily basis or weekly basis that have gone through our program 10 or 12 years ago. But 2 years is the minimum time that we expect they have to keep answering the phone. Next slide, please. The wraparound case management also is a key to our methodology here. Our case managers are amazing, and to have someone helping you with legal matters, with housing stability, with medical issues, et cetera, is extremely beneficial and helps folks be able to concentrate on their training and subsequently on their jobs, as opposed to all the niggling issues that recur that keep people occupied and often make it difficult for them to be the high quality employees that they can be. We screen for drive, motivation, and commitment to the career field. So we want to make sure folks want to actually work in the areas that we train in. And then we want to make sure we have highly committed folks. That's what I mean by self-selection. There is no more motivated group of people than folks who have at some point been locked up and then been subjected to underemployment or unemployment. They feel like any chance is their last chance because they've been denied so many opportunities. Therefore, having an opportunity to earn a living wage going out the door and to see that escalate in the early years of their career to something that allows them to think about home ownership and taking care of themselves and their families over the long term is amazing. We don't, as I said, require educational attainment levels. We do test folks when they come in so that we know how to help them better navigate the program, but not to disqualify them in any way. We require a driver's license by graduation. Our case managers work diligently to try to make sure that that occurs, as we know how uncooperative the public transportation system can be in terms of getting folks to work. So we want them to have a driver's license, and then we help them get vehicles, as we'll mention later. Focus on serving individuals with records. We have not a reentry program per se, but we certainly perform like one. Next slide, please. Classroom and hands-on training. Next slide. Next slide. Essential skills. We build work habits that lead to long-term career success. And we help folks develop an understanding, how things work within the companies they're going to go to. We work with folks to develop strategies for conflict resolution, because solving issues in the workplace is different than solving issues in the street. Resume writing, interview skills, punctuality, and goal setting. What we do find is that whatever we use a strength-based approach, we find that people bring many transferable skills, regardless of what they have done earlier in their lives, that there are many skills that they bring that can be transferable to help catapult them to the success that we are helping them to get in terms of setting them up with a career. Next slide, please. Case management, which I mentioned is key. Screening for health insurance, SNAP, so that folks are not hungry, cell phones. We work with MVLS for legal and expungement services. We try to help make sure folks are stable in terms of the housing, because without those are essentials that we all take for granted, and many of us take for granted. Housing, the fact that we'll have food on the table, the fact that we'll have lights and heat. Not necessarily the case for people who have been system involved. Driver's license attainment, I've touched on. We have instituted a vehicle purchase car match program to help folks purchase inexpensive vehicles so that they can start off their careers and have the means to get to and from work. That's something we've started in the last 3-4 years. That's been very successful. Of course, pandemic changes everything, and the high price of used cars and cars at auction has made it even more difficult than it was before, to avoid lemons, as it were.
All right, Wellington, just wanted to give you an update. You have about a minute left, and then we need to move on to Alex. I'm so sorry. I love you.
No, I appreciate it. As I said, 2 years of post-placement. Next slide, please. So building financial stability, we do financial coaching and education, banking and direct deposit, match savings programs, and credit building. Next slide. And these are the certifications for the trainings we do: brownfields, weatherization, and solar installer. Next slide. Hands-on training, contextualized learning. We try to use best practices. Next slide. And we use a social enterprise to help with the on-the-job training. We have that does work in homes in Baltimore City and Baltimore County, so that we can actually control the on-the-job training work environment. Next slide. And that's OJT, which is very beneficial. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And the impact of the job training is unparalleled. Every day, people walk back in my door to tell me about their new promotion. They just had a baby, they bought a home. It works. Just have to give people an opportunity and recognize their humanity. Thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Wellington, for sharing. I know there was a lot more that you offer, and you were able to offer us today, but we want to be conscious of everyone's time. So we'll definitely do a wraparound with you. Mr. Alex Smith, are you ready?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Smith. I'm the owner of Division Street Landscaping, Church Lane Professional Services, and 5A 15B Consulting. Division Street Landscaping is a full service landscaping company which only hires ex-offenders. It's fully staffed, you know, from all former knuckleheads, and that's who we're looking to hire. That's why the company was formed. And the same is true for Church Lane Professional Services. You know, while we were out in the field, we would get requests to do other jobs that didn't fall under the umbrella of landscaping. So I created that company to fulfill those needs of the customers. And it just was it just felt right to be able to create more opportunity. Last but not least, 5A, 15B consulting is what it really boils down to is that I believe that what I'm trying to do can be replicated all over the country, in every major city and every little town that has an issue with addressing some of the stats that we spoke about before. You know, I'm in the trenches. And so, you know, I believe that if you want to have these conversations, then you should have conversations with people who really, really understand the full breadth of what's going on with the men and women who have been behind the wall and are trying to do something different on the outside. So yeah, we can go forward. Opportunity development is what I like to think of what I do. It is basically creating the entire pipeline for when you empower people with various employment. It's like not asking for a seat at the table, it's building the table itself. And so we don't have to worry about really employer partners so much, because we create the companies. And we don't have, you know, we don't still have to ask for permission to do the right thing. We don't have to ask for permission to be a part of society. We are part of society. We are part of every city, you know, and we're a major part of every city. When you really look at the numbers, you're more likely than not to have someone in your family that is incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. And so that's what opportunity development is about. It's about saying, hey, they're identifying some needs and then creating a company that can fulfill these needs. And so for instance, like the Division Street Landscaping, it is a marriage between the city's needs to employ people with various employment, and the city's need to take care of its open spaces, such as vacant lots, city parks, and other venues that have greening efforts going on. We can go to the next slide, please. Well, that's fancy. I couldn't have did that. But yeah, some of the other things is that when I started to form these companies, I realized that people that were incarcerated weren't the only people that had various employment. You had, and I was really like struck by this quote. I mean, it almost brought me to tears about the quote from Frederick Douglass that says, it's better to raise good men than to repair broken ones. And so with that being said, I started to realize that, you know, incarceration isn't the only crime, for lack of a better term, that people could have that makes them hard to employ or difficult to employ. There are a lot of other barriers. And most of them stem from socioeconomic issues that have nothing to do with the person involved in it. Because most of the time, you know, when you're a victim of socioeconomic issues, you are born into those things, and your zip code itself can be a form of incarceration. You know, for instance, we have 21217 here in Baltimore. And I mean, we have, I think, almost a murder a day so far this year. And I think more than half of them are in that zip code. You know, and so when we talk about people having barriers to employment, we have to start way before somebody already has been touched by the criminal justice system. The other thing is that we have a large population of juvenile offenders, you know, and we want to stop this before it gets to the next level. So we hitting this on every angle. We're trying to get guys, because a lot of the guys, men and women who are returning home from prison have families. A lot of them will start families. And so we want to make sure that they are able to take care of those families. The other thing that I found is that, to be honest, I found that there are a lot of jobs out here for people who have been incarcerated. But what I found is that those jobs are not sufficient for an adult. Not an adult on his own, let alone an adult with a family to take care of. Especially not an adult with parole and probation fees, child support fees. And, you know, as we've seen lately, the cost of housing is going up every day. You know, it's you know, I was just surprised about, you know, I thought it was not real, some of the rent renewal letters that I've been seeing posted online, until my brother just told me that he's moved to Pennsylvania because he can't afford to rent here. So what we really want to focus on is not just getting people jobs, but getting people jobs that have the potential for them to really grow and to really be a steward in their community. These aren't just jobs for the sake of having jobs, because what I know about those kind of jobs is that you don't hesitate to walk away from those kind of jobs. If I give you a job and you're living in your grandmother's basement, and 6 months later, you're still living in your grandmother's basement, what's going to stop you from not showing up tomorrow? Because it hasn't changed your life. So when we talk about employing people, we want to give people, employment that they can take pride in. But also we want to give people employment that they can change their life to the point they don't want to go back to the old life. They don't want to go back to the things they did. They don't want to go back to their grandmother's couch or that street corner. And a lot of times these jobs you would not know how many people, like you wouldn't believe how many people I know go to work every day and still stand on the corner every night.
All right, Alex, you got about a minute left.
Got about a minute?
Yes, sir.
Cool. Next slide, I guess. Next slide. I just addressed that. Yeah, so I look at it in like 4 E's: exposure, education, employment, and entrepreneurship. You know, first you got to know about these careers, because a lot of guys, you know, if you don't have a backyard with grass, you don't know anything about jobs in the green field, in the green industry. So then once you get exposure, once you start talking to guys about this kind of work, talking to them about the salaries in this kind of work, then you can educate guys, and then you can potentially bring them into the field as an employee. But ultimately, no one is a better employer of people with background issues than another person with a background issue. We understand it. We know what's going on. We're able to deal with the issues that not only take place in the workplace, but at home. You know, so we kind of do all these kind of jobs. We are the employer, and we also sometimes the social worker. But that's because we have a unique understanding of the situation. You know, I know for a fact what it means to not have enough money and to get a job, and to have to work 2 jobs until you get 1 job to make it work. I know what it means for when somebody's family is the one that's giving them pressure to bring money home. You know, And so we can have these kind of conversations and we can say, you know, be still, stay on the path and make it happen. Was that it?
Thanks, Alex. I'm glad that I was able to hear you speak. I've heard your name and heard people ranting and raving about, you know, your public speaking and your addressing this topic. So I definitely agree. Would like to thank you for joining us today, and we'll love to hear more. We'll probably speak offline.
Absolutely.
We will move on to our final panelist, Ms. Bakira W. Shabazz. Definitely looking forward to hearing her presentation as well.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I am really excited to be here today. We're always thinking about new ways that we can engage with various communities, but not only communities, but ideals as well. And coming into the Chesapeake Bay program and the Citizens Advisory Council was something new for me, being a formerly incarcerated woman. And I am the first and only formerly incarcerated person to sit on either of these boards. And it is 2022. I became a member in 2021. And so it shows when we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, what really do we mean by those things? And are we really truly invested in diversity, equity, and inclusion? I think a lot of people stop at race and stop at sexual orientation when there's so many other things that we need to consider and so many other people that we are leaving out of the equation. So I'm just really thankful for this conversation today, and I'm always pushing the Chesapeake Bay program to do more and to be more risque, and then let's have these conversations. So I'm grateful that they are open for us to start having this dialogue so we can really get into the weeds of the work. And so my topic today is a long way from equity and inclusion. As we know, history here in America in 1619, there were some odd 19 African Americans that were brought to the shore of Jamestown. And here we are in 2022, and we're not too far removed from that very day in 1619 when those first African Americans appeared on the shores of Jamestown. And so you may question, what do you mean by that exactly? And so when you talk about a captured people that are the greatest victims of identity theft, and how we have been kept in that box and not able to evolve back into our full potential. And when I say back into our full potential, because when you look at history and all the contributions that African Americans have made globally and going into space, when you take a people and you remove them from their complete identity, it causes a catastrophic crisis even into our DNA. And so here we are at 2022, and we're trying to fight our way to be included, fight our way to be heard and to be understood and restored, right? And oftentimes in environmental spaces, for lack of a better words, it is extremely white spaces. And so we are constantly fighting to be understood, fighting to not be, misunderstood as well. And so when we talk about equity and inclusion, it is very important that those that are in leadership positions really understand what that means. And a lot of times, we'll have the people who create the problem also narrate and define what these things are, and that cannot be. And so you have to go in and you ask the people, if you want to know the truth about a thing and how it works, ask the people who are affected by it. I always tell people, and I also am a non-attorney advocate in the criminal justice space. If you want to know how to run a jail or a prison, ask the inmates. Do not go and ask people who have went to school. They won't know. All they know is what they've learned from an institution who has actually studied the people that are in jail, but not to a way to fix it, because I really believe the system doesn't want to fix these issues. It's up to us to fix them. And so if you want to know how to fix a thing, you go and ask the people who are most impacted by it. So I wanted to bring my colleagues, Alex and Wellington, into this conversation about equity and inclusion, because when we talk about the workforce, it is important, it is vitally important, especially when we come to terms of capacity building, that organizations of color are put in a space where they are extremely supported. And I mean through grant funding, through additional supports within organizations that are, you know, top heavy and have the funds to be able to do different programs, because that is what we are not seeing. A lot of our organizations are carrying the weight of the work on our backs. We're working regular jobs and using our, you know, monies from work, which is not adequate, to fund our organizations and to continue to do this work in the communities. And that's just not a sustainable model. It leads to burnout, and it also leads to the work not being completed, right? And so we want to take the rest of this time to talk about how our work is affected by being a long way from equity and inclusion, and how it continues to affect our communities and the incarceration rate and recidivism. And so I'm going to bring my colleagues in. If you all can unmute as we have this dialogue conversation. So both of you all are you all are in the trenches, like on the ground. And it is important for people to understand that folks that are on the ground and also that are on the top. So that means that they are handling the on the ground work and the day-to-day operations of an organization. So you have a 360 worldview of what's going on and how this thing works, the system works. How are you all affected, and how much more can be done if you all were able to be supported by grants that normally, and we're talking about, you know, big grants, multi-million-dollar grants. Or we can even start at $500,000 grants, because that's a sizable contribution that could really help, you know, a small organization in these communities. Tell me how you all are affected, and how, if you all can have access to that type of funding and support, how much greater the impact can be in the communities.
Before you all start with that dialogue, I just wanted to let our participants know that you can begin asking questions in the chat box. We're going to let this conversation go on until 12:50 because I'm dying to hear it. I'm sitting here with goosebumps, like literally, I can't stay still. But you can start asking questions in the chat box. We'll end this conversation at 12:50. And we'll try to get to a couple of questions before we have to end. Again, we're going to be conscious of everybody's time. This is a lunch and learn session. This is the beginning of a series for the Chesapeake Bay Program Diversity Workgroup. And I'm just super excited about what's happening right now. Thank you so much.
Stop.
Oh, we got a guest. He said he want to get in on this. He said he know the answer.
Everybody has a why. One of Alex's whys.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I got to work hard to feed this Boston, man. Well, you want to go first and answer this question, Wellington, or addressing this question?
I will jump in. I will say two things. I will say one, because I work under the umbrella of a white founded and white led organization. Probably amongst the three of us, we have access to more funding, and that's why we're able to do a lot of the wraparound services and a lot of what we do, and serve, you know, over 100 folks a year, which I'm grateful to do, and you know, no apologies there. But I'm just tired, and to be quite honest, I'm tired. I'm tired of relitigating and refighting the same fights. And I know I'm not supposed to say I'm tired, because that sounds like capitulation. Well, there's no capitulation in me, but I am tired. I'm tired that my kids and my grandkids, now that I'm starting to have those as well, are relitigating and refighting the same battles that we fought, because every time we make some headway, there are forces in our society which I now understand intentionally try to push us back into the boxes that we were in, try to push us back into the lack and the lack of access that has created the problem. So one of the things we need, we need resources for sure. And we need those resources directed at the real problems and not resources that just, fill somebody's pockets that don't answer the questions. But yeah, money is a thing, is a real thing, and money allows us access, and money allows us the resources to direct and to change folks' lives. And we need that more than ever. But we also need folks to understand this is a human rights issue. Go ahead, Alex.
Most definitely.
Absolutely. The way I look at the situation is this. Finances run the world at the end of the day. When you look at what separates a nice community from a not so nice community, it boils down to money. When you look at what separates a well-run organization from an organization that's not run well, oftentimes it boils down to money. Because you can't bring in the talent that you would like to bring in order to get things running the right way. And I think that there's this notion that there are some organizations that do this work by magic. I get questioned a lot about whether or not I can do work or whether or not I have the capacity to do certain things. And my answer is always pay me and sit back and watch. Because the reality of it is these organizations, these companies that have, deeper pockets aren't doing anything special. And that's what it's being made to seem like. People who have actually said to me, things like, oh, if we give you this amount of money, it'll fold your organization. If we give you this project, it'll fold your company. And I'm saying there's no difference between me and ABC Landscaping that you gave the $2 million to, except they got the $2 million. Those guys that are working in their crews are coming out for free. They coming out to do the work because they're being paid. And so when people say stuff like that, I don't even think they understand, one, even how insulting it is. And two, to the assumption that I wouldn't be able to handle it, or that I wouldn't be able to form a team that could assist me in handling it. And that's really one of the biggest things where, lately I've been thinking about, this whole notion, and much respect to Sister Shirley Chisholm, about bringing a folding chair to the table. But I remember when I was a little kid and I finally got to go to the big table, the adult table at Thanksgiving, and I still had to ask somebody to give me some potatoes. I still wasn't really accepted at the table like an adult. I was just too big to sit at the baby table, But my view wasn't the same. My access wasn't the same. I wasn't allowed in the conversation that was going on around me. And that's kind of how it is now when we get invited to the table. We don't have access to the same pots everybody got. And then when we ask for it, it's somebody else taking a spoon and shaking it and then giving it to them, putting stuff on our plate. They having conversations that we're not allowed to have, or we're not allowed to be a part of, because they're speaking for us. Mm-hmm. and telling us what we need.
Yes.
And so that's where I'm at. That's how I feel about that question.
Thanks both of you all for that. And I was the individual that was responsible for, when I met Alex last year, when we were on another panel, I was just taken back by his brilliance. And, you know, I was like, I have to showcase Alex to the world. Like, I really want people to see formerly and currently incarcerated people in a new light. One of the questions that were asked in the chat was about you know, the pipelines. How does it, you know, work when, you know, people want to be into the career part of it and the back office part of it. And what we do know about a lot of formerly and currently incarcerated people is that they're incredibly brilliant. It's when you think about what it takes to run a drug operation, that is a whole business. It's a legal one, but it is a whole business that takes a lot of work. And so you'll have people that have brilliant ideas, but with no supports and no financial backing, that idea probably is unobtainable, and it can be the next cure for cancer or what have you, or shoot, COVID, COVID. And if you don't have that support and that financial backing, you got the greatest idea, but it stays at that level. And so when we're talking about climate change, sea level rise, and all of the particulate matter transmission, all of these things that affects our ability to exist on this planet, and we're Xing people out, not including them because of these labels that the system give them. Just think about how much we are losing by not hearing that voice and not providing those supports and financial backing that is necessary. You know, even with just helping to write grants for small organizations is a huge issue. You know, it's just so many barriers to us being able to get what it is that we need. And so they want us to fall under white organizations and basically go back to the picking cotton part of it. No, we are able to run full businesses. We are able to build capacity, but in order to do that, you have to have money to be able to pay folks, because it is extremely disrespectful to ask marginalized people to just volunteer. It's disrespectful. And so when you all are doing this work and employing and training, the sustainability of that person and the likelihood of them recidivating is basically zero. Can you all talk to why that is and why this is so necessary? And we got 1 minute on that too.
Yeah, that's a loaded topic.
Well, we still good question.
We do have questions coming in. Bakira,
Okay.
I think you kind of addressed the first question. I'm not 100% sure. I think that's what you were attempting to do in your wrap up. Am I correct?
Well, the second part is just explaining why it's so important that you provide the supports, and how, if our issue is crime, and we hear it all the time, if we want to reduce crime, that is a societal problem that we all need to contribute to. And so this is the answer to it. People being able to work and have high self-esteem and take care of themselves are not going to commit crimes. They're just not. So I wanted to be able to expose that so folks could understand, you know, what attributes to a lot of this behavior. So economics is not that somebody wakes up in the morning and say, I want to be a criminal when I grow up.
Great. Definitely, I understand that. In the conscious of time and also being able to try to wrap up, we have a question or a statement here from Wendy O'Sullivan, who is my co-chair of the Diversity Workgroup. And Wendy, thank you for your leadership with the Diversity Workgroup and all the other entities in the Chesapeake program that you are involved in. Wendy said National Park Service works with partners to fund positions to have formerly incarcerated individuals work in our national parks. Did not know that, but it is a challenge to hire directly. So we need to partner with community organizations. Example in Baltimore is Project Serve at Fort McHenry with and through living classrooms and others. What are your experiences working with state or federal agencies? If someone could address that in about 3 minutes, I'd appreciate it.
I'll jump into that real quick. When we actually had a program called Work to Live Well in conjunction with the Department of Natural Resources in the state of Maryland, and had very high hopes for it. What we found was that because the state in its hiring practices, even though the state was partnering with us, still did not drop restrictions. So we were training people for positions that they were not going to be allowed to fill. And so we then plan B, because of our own resources in terms of finding employer partners, found folks in some landscaping companies and some other companies. But the whole point was to get folks into the Department of Natural Resources, because nationwide, there's a green ceiling. There's only 13% of the people working in those types of positions in parks and recs and blah, 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 that are of color. And yet here in Maryland, when we attempted to do that, ran into roadblocks that the state itself creates. So there's a lot. Maybe the federal government is more forthcoming in terms of making it easier, and that would be great.
I agree. I don't know how many people have looked at a government grant application, but it's daunting. So, it's time for the federal government to come down and start having these conversations. How do we streamline this grant making process? I always say, if you're applying and have the ability to apply and get it, then start to write in sub-grants to other organizations. It's just really as simple as that, folks. These things are not hard to do. We can do it right now.
All right, it looks like all of our questions have been answered, but I'm going to close up with the statement from Johnny Filson, who
Kevin, we had one more question, and can I just real quickly see if we had any questions that came in through Facebook?
Sure.
Rachel, no questions from Facebook.
Okay, great. And then the last question we had, what has been the impact of ban the box laws of effectuating greater equal opportunity for persons with criminal conviction backgrounds, equal employment, sorry.
I know the ban the box, the question is still on a lot of our applications here in Virginia. And that has been extremely problematic. And I think we need to go a little bit further than just banning the box, because that's just the precursor. Once you get in the interview and you have to answer the question anyway, you're still going to be denied the job. So it's a waste of time. These surface level things that make it look like you're doing a thing that is not doing. Let's stop that. To make because we say, oh, that's great. No, it wasn't great. It was a facade. So what we need to do is, if you have been convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, if you're trying to get a job as a bank teller, yes, you need to disclose that. But if you're trying to get a job as an electrician, no, you shouldn't have to, disclose that information, especially if it's been a certain amount of time. The charges should drop off accordingly upon application. And that's a different topic that we could go into later on. But I see a lot of even our applications within, the environmental sector, they ask about your criminal background record, which is this for what?
Well, ironically, it's ironic now. I got called to a call to action at City Hall late one night a couple of years ago by our mayor, Catherine Pugh, who has just returned home herself from federal prison. And she was one of the people who inspired me, to keep it moving when I was thinking about the things I was thinking about, and saying that, we are really the answer to my guys never sat in the interview. My guys have never had to answer whether or not they were an ex-offender or not. And that's because of who the owner is. When I get a call and somebody says they want to go to work, I give them a shovel. Let's see what you're working with. You really want to work? There you go. Hop on that mold. Let's get to work. And that's really what's going to change the game when more of us start to take the step into the role of entrepreneur and owners. That the box And even like, you know, I know this might be controversial, but like even like things like expungement, that they're good. But again, I know people who got the record expunged and it still pops up, you know. But on the flip side, I can show you 100 guys who are ex-offenders who are doing very well for themselves because they got opportunity in certain industries, and you know, and that's what is more important to highlight: the people that are doing well, the people that in been given opportunities and showing how they excel once given opportunity.
I would co-sign both of them, but what Ms. Shabazz was saying about ban the box being basically window dressing, I agree. It just is a delay in when the door gets slammed in your face. So you know, you get through the initial part of the process, but the end result will often be the same if that's in the purview of the folks doing the interviewing. Yeah, if people, you know, initiatives often get watered down and diluted in legislatures because legislators are not risk takers, and the people feel like they're taking some type of risk by supporting a community of folks who have been voiceless, who have been even shut out of voting in many cases. So, you know, why worry about what that constituency is saying or needs, because, you know, they are not going to keep me in position. So we need to, you know, really just be practical about what we were saying earlier, is that these folks are highly committed, highly motivated, probably more motivated than the workforce at large. It's what I call beat the street. When I talk to employers, I say, look, don't use me if after you start to use me, my folks are not successful at a higher rate than the folks you hire off the street. I'm going to beat the street because my folks want to work. They've been denied work. They want to go. They're ready to go. So society has to stop this foolishness, stop the game playing, stop the disinformation and labeling, which, you know, just persists, and it goes on and on and on ad nauseum, and just give people the opportunities back, give them their citizenship back in full, give them their rights back in full, and let them go to work and let them participate fully and stop being afraid of the success that they're going to have.
Well, we have definitely received a wealth of information. This conversation is not only intriguing, it has left me sitting here with thoughts of possible follow-ups to this discussion. I'm sure we'll have many offline conversations, and I don't believe this will be the end of our conversation about re-entry at all. Just to be conscious of everyone's time, it is almost 1 o'clock, so I wanted to thank everyone for joining us. I wanted to thank the Diversity Steering Committee for all its help in planning this. I would also like to thank the Diversity Workgroup, who is sitting in another room on a different link, because we have a follow-up meeting to this conversation, and I'm sure it's going to be very, very heart-driven and very, very heartfelt. Wendy O'Sullivan, thank you for your leadership. Colleagues at DOEE who joined this conversation, thank you for joining. I did want to mention before ending that the District Department of Energy and Environment is in the process of launching a re-entry program. It was through a grant. It's called the Returning Citizen Stormwater Workforce Development Program. It was awarded to constituent services worldwide, and they will be launching this program. So there will be more info on our progress with re-entry later this year and into next fiscal year. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. There is a list of everyone's contact information up on the screen now. There's also a list of resources. All of the facts that we quoted, we have these resources that you can go and look at as well. But thank you for joining us. It goes without fanfare. Brianna Yancey, Allison Ning, Bo Williams, Rachel Felver, Marissa, I can't remember your last name, and I think the gentleman's name is Alex. I have not had an opportunity to meet him or talk with him. This would not have happened without this core team that pulled this together in about 30 days and got speakers and was able to see this to fruition. So I'm very, very grateful for that. This is not the last you've heard of the Diversity Workgroup series presents. Our next subject will be on mental health, and it will be in May. So there will be information to follow on that. There's something on the screen right now, but Mr. Kevin can't see it. So please feel free to look at it. And again, everyone, thank you for joining. Please reach out to those who you'd like to continue the conversations with. We are all readily available to do that. And again, thank you.